So in this video, I'd like to continue from the previous video, and that is we were talking about sequences. Now in this video, we'll be going over lists, which is a mutable data type. So just quickly, mutable is when you can edit, and immutable is when you can't edit something. So a string like hello is immutable, but a list in Python is mutable, and to initialize a list, we can simply do square brackets. Now what this means is basically you've created an empty list, and I'm going to go ahead and assign it into a variable. We just call it a basket. Now if we do a print statement on this basket, we can see that we get the string representation visually and it's empty. So let's go ahead and put in some items in. So I'm going to just do some random words, so oranges and banana. So the cool thing about a list is it's not only restricted to one kind of data type. I can even put numbers and true or false values. I can even do just even a print statement. Like I can literally do anything. So that's just something to keep in mind. You don't have to have one specific data type in a list. A list sole purpose is just to have many items in it, and you have to make sure that you separate them using a comma. So let me go ahead and just remove these values. Cool. So now if you run the program, we get our list with the 3 items. Now there's also another way to actually append items into the list, and that is to use the append method. So simply type in basket.append followed by some value. So it could be any value. I'm just going to do strawberry, and if we do a quick print on this, we can see we have initially those 3 and now we get strawberry. So one thing to keep in mind is that the append function, when you do the append, it adds it to the rightmost. That's just something to keep in mind. Now what if we were to remove or want to remove some items from the list? Well, we can do that as well using another method called pop. So there's 2 variances of this function. So if I just do pop and I run the program, as you can see, from 3 we got down to 2, and what happened was that the last item in the list got removed. So what pop does is it just removes the last item in the list. Now this pop function also accepts an argument or a value inside it. So if I do 0 and I run the program, as you can see, this time it removed the first item from the list. So 0 is first item in the list because it's index based, and so we don't have apple, now we have oranges and bananas. I can also do 1 and we run it and we have 0, so 0, 1. So this item doesn't exist and this is what we get. Now we can also add items. So suppose I wanted to add an item into the front of the list. I can just do basket.insert. Now this function or this method, by the way, function, method, they pretty much mean the same thing, so I'm just going to be using them interchangeably. Anyway, insert given 2 values, so you have your position and value. Given a position, it has to be an integer. You can, and this value gets added into that list. So if I just do 0 and do pairs and I run, as you can see, it shifts apple, oranges and banana all to the right by 1 and puts it in the first place. If I wanted to do it there, I get pairs because initially it's 0, 1. We wanted pairs to be in here, so pairs just slides up and oranges and bananas shift to the right. So I can keep doing this. So it's 1, 2 and 3 nuts and avocado. I run this, and as you can see, so 1, 2, 3, and then we have our original items. Also, a list can have multiple of the same values. So as you can see, I have avocado twice, and if we just run that, there's no problem with repeating values in a list, so that's fine as well. Cool, so now we know how to add and remove items from a list, but what if we wanted to change an item? Well, to do that, you could simply do basket, which is the name of the list, followed by index and a value. So suppose I wanted to change oranges to maybe something else, I can easily do that. So first we gotta get the index that oranges is in, so it's 1, so I'm just going to do 1, and I wanted to change oranges to true, just for the sake of this video. Now if you run it, as you can see, we have true, so oranges was replaced by true, and I can do this for all the items as well. So this can be false, and this can be some number. Run this, and we get that. So that's cool. So I forgot to mention before that insert and append is two other functions which you can use to add items to the list, but you can also do something like this. So if I do basket plus equals drink, I run this, I get drink, and as you can see, this plus equals is almost the same as append, other than just the way we write it, so it adds it to the rightmost. And I can also have a list added to it, so just do that. So now what I'm doing is I'm adding a list, so I'm joining two lists together. That's why we have this here. But if I was to use the dot append, and I do this, now what's different is that I'm actually adding a list as a list item. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 items in here. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 3 additional items inside this list. So this is a sub list. So that's something you can do as well. And another useful function is the index function. So suppose I wanted to know what index oranges was at. I could do a quick print statement, and I can do basket.index and do oranges. And if I run that, I get 1, and that's true because 0, 1. I can also use this to access, so I can do basket and I get oranges. So what this basically does was, rather than doing 1, we actually found out what index oranges was in, and we printed it out. So I can just do banana, and I get banana. So just going back to the previous one where we had another list in here, so now it's false, and that value in there. So if we were to print this basket, I'll just double print it, so we have 4 elements in here. And what if I wanted to say access false in this whole list? So to do this, firstly we would start off by typing in our variable name for the list. Then we would find the index of that. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3. So we just do 3. And now if you print, so now if you print this, we get that sublist. So I want to access the second item, so that would be 1, and now we get false. So that's how you can access lists inside a list. So just going back to removing items from a list, we had pop where if we give it an index, we remove that item at that index, and if we don't give it an index, it'll just remove the rightmost value in the list. So there's also another method called the remove method, and that is basket.remove, and now I can specify some value. So let's say we wanted to remove this whole thing in here. I could just do that. Now if you run it, we get oranges and bananas. So this once again removes from the right. So suppose we wanted to sort a list. We can simply do that using the sort function. So just like remove, rather than saying remove, we just do sort, and we run this, and we get apples, bananas, and oranges rather than apple, oranges, and bananas. So the way this one works is it sorts by the characters in the list. So say I'd replace this with numbers. Now we should get -12, 0, and 2. So that sorts by integers. So smallest to largest. I can also reverse the list if I wanted to. So let me go back to the previous values. I can just do reverse, and that will work. So apple, oranges, and bananas. Recall that in the previous video we went over slicing. All of the stuff there can be used in this list as well. So if I wanted to reverse this list through slicing, I would just do that, and that will work fine. So I can also, let me just put a few more items in here. So let's say I wanted to grab everything after and including oranges. I just do 1, print that, and I get oranges, bananas, and 3, I just get oranges and bananas. So if I just do 4, now I should get oranges, bananas, and nuts. So you can do the same thing. So list slicing works here as well. So suppose you wanted to quickly populate a list with some default value. So say in your basket, or let's just say you had a list of students, and each student by default has no names. So what I can do is just type in none. Now say you wanted to represent a student as none, but for 12 students. Well, you could do none, 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 like that. You could just keep doing it 12 times, or you could just simply do, let me just change this, or you could just do that times how many students you want. So now I get 12 students, and we can use the len function to find out how many students we have, and that should give us 12. Cool. So that works. We can also check using the in operator. So let's just go back to our previous. Okay, so say we wanted to check if strawberries, actually let's just check berry. So berries in basket. Let me just change this back. So if I run this, we get a false. Now suppose I do apples, oh, whoops. So suppose I had something like this, and I wanted to just check and in all of this. Let's go ahead and see what happens. So I do and. Now that's going to give me false. So the way this works, and the reason this works like this, because unlike a string has a sequence of characters, and say we had a string called something like that. So if you run this, we get a true. So what the in does is it just goes over each character, and as soon as it checks the and, so it goes A and D, okay, it matches here, it gives us a true. But in a list, it checks each element, so it just checks, is there an and, or is this an and? Nope. Is this an and? Nope. Is this an and? Nope. So that's the difference. It goes over each item and not each character in an item. So if I wanted this to work, I would have to do something like that. And now I should get true. So this is checking the first item. And once we get the first item, this would do the whole check character by character. So now that we know some of the basic stuff about a list, what if we wanted to go over each item in our list? So when we use lists or any kind of sequencing, there has to be a way to iterate over or loop through each element or character in something. And there certainly is, and that's called a for in. So what a for in or for loop does is basically it loops through a sequence. So long as a data type has a sequence, a for loop will work. So let's say I wanted to go over all the items in my basket. I can just do for item in basket, have a colon and a tab, print item. So now if I run this, it goes apple and avocado. Let me just change this to apples and avocados. So cool. So now if I just run that, apples and avocados, oranges, bananas, nuts, and pears. So that's how you go over each item in a list. And this can come in real use. So this loop is really useful. You'd use it a lot when you're dealing with lists. There's also another way to do loops is using the range function. So for I in range, and we can do length of basket. We print I. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means this loop will just print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the way the range works is that given a value, so in this case we get 5, the range always goes from 0 to 4 because it minuses 1 from this value. So if this value was 10, it would really go from 0 to 9. It's always 1 minus this value. So let me go ahead and put this back. So now I get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I can also use this to access elements in my basket or list. So I can do basket and square brackets. So if you remember from the previous video, using a square bracket and some kind of value will give us the element or the item in that index position. So in this case, the first iteration or the first loop will be a 0. So we get this. 1, it'll get this. 2, 3, and 4. So if you run this, as you can see, we get those items. And if I just print I, as you can see, at index 0, we have apples and avocados. At index 1, we have oranges. Index 2, banana. 3, nuts, and 4, pears. So that's how this one works. So the range function actually has multiple variations of writing it. If I just remove this, actually I'm just going to print I. If I do 10, we should see 0 to 9 because 10 isn't printed. It's always one less than this. That's going to be the final one. So if I run this, we get 0 to 9. Now I can also do 1 to 10, which will go from 1 to 9. So this value over here is always included, or it's inclusive. We'd call it an inclusive value. This value is always exclusive, so it's one less than this value that's going to be printed up to. So if you run this, we get 1 to 9. Now if you wanted to actually print the 10, we would have to do 1 plus this. So 11 minus 1 is 10, now we get 1 to 10. So that's how the range function in the loop works. So what we can also do is, suppose we wanted to skip numbers, say print my numbers from 0 to 9, but I wanted to skip every second number. We can use a step for that. So I can just do a 2, I run this, and we get our 2 times table. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now if I just up the value, you go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So it never prints out this side of the value, it'll always print out this. And we can do this with even 4s. We run this, and we get 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. And if we had 28, we get 24. So it'll never print the side of the value, regardless. It'll always either print one less of this, or it won't print this one. Now this is, so the 2 loops we saw was a for I in range and for item in a sequence. We also have a while loop. So the way while loops work is print. So we have while, and then we have a statement. So the statement has to be true, and while that's true, this happens. So if I run this, we'll always get always printed out because this is always true. But if I have false, this never gets printed because a while loop always works when this is true. So while something is true, do this, else don't do that. So what I can do is, suppose I wanted to print out each of these using a while loop. I can do that using this method. So firstly, I would create an index variable and I would set it to 0. Then what I would do is I would say while index does not equal the length of the basket, we can maybe access the list. So print the basket and index, and we can do index plus equals 1. So let me go through why this is like this. So firstly, this check over here. So while index does not equal the length of the basket. So while index does not equal 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So while index does not equal 4, do this. So with this initial value, we know that it's not equal the length of the basket. So it'll always be true. So index does not equal the length of the basket. So then we would do print basket followed by the index. So index is an integer, so this will be 0. Then you increment the index using a plus equals 1. Now this becomes 1. So 1 does not equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1 does not equal 5. Therefore, you print out what's in index 1. So let's go ahead and run this. And using a while loop, we managed to print out all our elements in our list, which is pretty cool. So this little operator might be new. I'm not too sure if I covered this in the previous videos, but basically this is just does not equal. This means it does not equal. You can even do, actually, yeah, you can only do like this. So this is does not equal. Cool, so that pretty much does it for this video. I'm not too sure if I'm missing out anything else. I don't think so. But yeah, so this was quite a bit of a long video, hopefully not too long. But in the next video, we'll take a look at what a tuple is, and that's also another sequence, and we'll see what kind of things we can do with that.